Hey guys, so I wanted to take some time today to check out and review my initial impressions from the Conqueror'sBlade beta. It was published by my.com and developed by Booming Games. Both are European headquartered companies, and so my.com will be the publisher. They've done quite a few different MMOs that they've published throughout North America and Europe, and the premise of the game is really a MMO sandbox war title that's based around sieging and holding onto territories, and it's supposed to have a pretty open economy. Now that sounds really interesting and is a lot for a title to have, and a lot have promised that, mainly titles like Black Desert and Bless, which obviously we see how those have turned out. But I'm interested to see how this game shapes up. The reason I'm interested is because I feel like they've done a really good job of capturing a couple different titles. The main one that's the most obvious is Mount & Blade, and the second one is actually a mix between like Dynasty Warriors with For Honor, and so it ends up becoming this really interesting mesh of strategy with action, and it kind of gets engrossing. I feel like there's a lot of potential for the title, and I'm excited to see how it turns out. There's a very limited amount of the gameplay to actually check out while you were in the beta, so we'll kick it off and look at a couple of the starting zones and character creation before we actually dive into some of the meat in the gameplay. So if you want to check out the meat of the gameplay and the thoughts and how that looks and feels, you can actually check that out by clicking this video here. If not, we'll go ahead and we'll jump right in. So as you load into the game, you can go ahead and create a character. Now, once you've created a character, you'll actually choose where you want to start your adventure. You have the Western area, which is more German, Swiss sort of mix match of Austria, which says it's a rich fertile land ringed by mountains and threaded with clear winding rivers. Its capital, Arigola, not sure what language that's supposed to be based off of, lies at the center of the region between two major lakes and a marshland, acting as a choke point between the northwestern plains and the less populous east and southeastern valleys. What's really interesting here is there's actually choke points. So if you're trying to invade an open world PvP, there's a great place for people to coordinate and set up defenses to actually shut you off from coming in and protect the capital. So really cool concept there in building the map around the main premise of the game and thinking about that from a sieging perspective. A couple of the regions were closed, so you couldn't see that. But then we also have the Maoyang region, which is a vast desert encompassed by mountains. It appears barren, but home to tough and unsentimental people. I don't really know why they say that or what that really means, but they're unsentimental. They don't really have passion, I suppose. It's arid, save for a little lake that's the capital city, which is called Anliang. So very much an Asian town, but what's interesting is it's an Asian town and country based on the languages and the naming of all the cities within the country, I suppose. But it's in the desert. So not really sure how that works, and I wonder about the closed regions, which are going to be, which is okay, it's a fantasy game, right? It's not based on history, but still interesting to take a very uniquely styled concept and put it into a desert. And the landscape is super bland, like very boring. Austria is a much prettier place. It was much more populated during the beta and the testing phases, and it's only shown to reason why. There were some other closed regions. I'm wondering if there's going to be other sort of races and allegiances. The one thing that is interesting, and we'll kind of look at this in character customization, is, you know, you obviously have your different skin tones and eyes and hair colors and things like that. We'll see this here. You have your male and your female choices. You can pick a national flag, which I don't really understand what that means. So I actually selected German when I first hopped in, and I went and loaded into Austria, and all the names were in German. And I thought I just changed the language of the game based on a flag, but it wasn't that the case at all. So I quickly like deleted that character, logged back into a new character, selecting the US flag, and it was still in German. So I don't really quite understand what that's about just yet. So hopefully that's explained a little bit more, or there's some tooltip or something. Because when you do load into a game, you see your national flag, but that obviously doesn't indicate where you're from, right? So you don't know who you're playing with. I don't know. Weird concept to me, but it's in there. So pick whatever flag you want to represent. If you're from Uganda, go for it. So you can see in the customization, we have some face presets, hair, details, and they range anything from Asian to Middle Eastern to obviously like English, German, typical Western, and it's very limited. I'm hoping that this limited selection of hairs and styles that really don't let you play around with them. It's 2018 and many MMOs have done much better to let you really create a character that looks like yourself. So I'm hoping that they actually let you have a little bit more customization as the game goes into full release, and it's not some cosmetically locked window, because it is very bare bones. And as we look at eyebrows, eyeshadow, what should be much more and could be much more is really not done. Like, why do you have 4 colors for lips? Kind of lame, right? Like, do some hex RGB stuff. The beard styles are also quite limited, and the character customization overall felt very lackluster for a title that's based around you being a commander, akin to Mountain Blade or Dynasty Warriors with your army. So that's really it for character customization and loading into the game. So what I'm hoping to see is some more sub nationalities to pick from. It is based on historical empires, so you have like Asian empires, you have Swedish halberdiers and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring in any sort of Middle Eastern flair. There are a lot of different classes that we can actually jump into as well. As we get into some of the classes, you'll really see a lot of the different feel. And what I really do like is that they have gendered classes, which I know a lot of people don't like, but it makes sense within the confines of the game to an extent, right? There are some classes where I'm like, oh, okay. But from a historic aspect, you do have 2 female characters that you can't be as a guy. And as a guy, you have 2 characters that you can't be as a girl, which makes sense because, and we'll talk about it as we get to that point. And to be frank, the classes look super badass in their armor. I don't know if that's like the max level armor yet, or if that's just, a placeholder. Like your top tier set of armor, it's fucking cool. So let's hope that it is in the game indeed. So you have your longsword and shield. They're kind of the upfront brawlers, fighters, very good at attacking, a little bit of defense, very standard kind of basic class. You'll also have your poleaxe class, which very interesting because it's got quite a long range on the poleaxe and does a lot of damage. So you can actually tear up some infantry, be able to fight on foot really, really well. So pretty good to go in and actually break up the lines, enemies' armies, right, who are progressing through. Next, you have the spear. Again, kind of the same idea. The head of the spear, can deal a lot of piercing damage, but it's great for charging, but in slashing, but it has a hard time breaking through shields because of that, right? Which makes sense. However, the range is nice because you can get behind your army and try to poke when the enemy is attacking, things like that, and use your army and troops as a wall to basically go through and attack with, right? So very interesting combination there, and fun to play around with. The Nodachi, the sort of samurai class, 2-handed sword, 4 to 7 foot long blade. That's very long. I didn't realize that their swords are that long. They're very, very fun. Just your standard sort of little defensive rolls around, does some pretty cool attacks, things like that. You also have short sword and shield. They're a little bit more mobile than the long sword and shield. They are great to fight right in the front lines in the trenches of your infantry, but do a little bit more damage as well. They're kind of just like the I want to play a shield that has the defensive capabilities, but a little bit more offensive, right? You do have the glaive character, or Guando, as it says. Or Guandao. I don't know why it says that. Very good against lightly armored infantry. So when you bring in, archers, or you bring in like lesser armored troops, ground troops to come in, very good to go in and break those up, fight them, and actually clear those waves, because that is a very important part of the gameplay, is to have generals or players players who are actually able to break up the armies, so you can progress into the sieges, things like that. We also have the bow character, which I think should be renamed longbow because you do have the short bow for female characters, but they also look pretty badass. Like they're right up there with longsword and shield and Nodachi for my aesthetic look, right? And the aesthetic does not change, or the armor does change slightly when you do change which region you want to load into, which I thought was a nice touch to sort of fit. However, I'm not really quite sure why, because a lot of them look very much the same. For example, the Nodachi should definitely look Asian compared to the Western, right? It's their game, not mine. So the bow's really nice. You would really want to sit back again and sort of bombard, do sieging damage with your arrows, break up some of those armies so that you can help your troops progress in. You're going to have a very tough time, and it is aimed to shoot. You also have musket, and I didn't play the bow or the musket class, so I wish I knew more. I didn't have time, unfortunately, to work through there, but I would assume they function pretty similarly. The musket doing probably higher damage but less DPS, if that makes sense, whereas the bow does more attacks but a little bit less damage. So it is very interesting to see how that works, because you would think a musket would outclass a bow, but you know, they're both in the game. So I guess if you want to play a gun character, play the gun character that's dressed as Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai, or if you want to be more traditional with the bow, go ahead and play that. So there's a lot of different options. Once you actually click in and select the class that you're interested in playing, you can go ahead and create, you know, the character, load into the game, and it starts you off with the basic armor and lets you select the region you're going into. So I wish it was a little bit more fleshed out, but we can also look at the females. Again, not a lot of details, not a lot of things. I'm still thinking they're quite a bit away from launch. I'm thinking probably Q2 of 2019 based on what I played. Again, you would just expect them to have a hex wheel to change colors, but you do not, and it's very limited, again, for pretty much across the board of things that you're able to edit, which is not the most interesting. So again, looking at the characters, you do have your short bow, which is the opposite of just bow, which again, I feel like should be longbow. But they're very, very quick, great for fighting alongside infantry, and the front lines doing some damage. Now, they do have a little bit less in terms of what they can do, which is a shame. But I do like the female aspects of the styles, right? You know, you still have your glaive, your short sword and shield, your Nodachi, which looks really cool. Your long sword and shield, again, looks very, very good. I don't know why they switched up the order. I feel like they should have just kept long sword and shield at the top, right? Like it was before with glaive, and then Nodachi and all that sort of stuff, and then put, you know, musket, short bow, and then maybe added the dual blades in to replace the spear class, right? So you have a spear as a male, you don't have that as a female, and poleaxe as well. I don't think you get poleaxe as a female. So so when you're looking at those two, yeah, it makes sense. Those are pretty big weapons, probably not able to handle that, although you do have a Nodachi, which is a 7-foot long blade. So again, I guess for infantry sakes and things like that, it gives the two class changes, but where you have short bow and dual blades, although I feel like kind of shorting the women's side is weird because a lot of guys like myself play female characters a lot. They do have the musket class, and they also have the dual blade class, which is your assassin class, and I was very drawn to that as I've played rogues and I like sort of the get in get out sort of gameplay, although when we get in the gameplay section we'll see how kind of awkward that is for this title in specific. But again, looks really, really cool. It looks like she would be able to fuck you up. So I create my Shaniqua, which I already had a character before, the one I told you about messing up with German. And we launched into Mao Yang versus Osteria. So I wanted to see sort of the difference, and obviously there really wasn't a difference, which was interesting. So we'll go ahead and jump into some of the gameplay on the next video. If you have any questions or want to comment about what you thought if you played the beta, or want to know more about it, feel free to ask any questions, and I'd be happy to answer in the comments below.